All right. Good morning or good afternoon to everyone, as well as Happy New Year from Bow Technologies on today. Thank you so much for joining our Coffee with Manitou session on today, where we are going to explore permissions and global options to kick off the new year. Great time to revisit permissions and global options is at the start of the new year, and this is why we're presenting this material today. We are always trying to present material that is relevant to your operations each and every month that we offer the Coffee with Manitou sessions. So thank you for joining us, taking time out of your busy schedule. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay. All right, so first of all, I want to discuss here what the objectives here are on today. First of all, we want to discuss the best practices when setting your permission profiles. We want to look at the new global options that were added in 2015. I'm going to highlight a few of them. You that have worked with our global options before, there's a lot of global options that we have that you can really customize your Manitou system. So we're going to highlight a few of those that were added in 2015, some newer ones. And we're going to discuss some of the common options that are often underused, like color options or alarm handling status, customer user-defined fields, and much, much more. We're also going to discuss other Watchdog message alert options. I mean, most of our user base understands that we do have Watchdog message alerts that gives you the ability for them to scroll on the bottom of your screen with the scroll bar, but there's other message alert options that are available to you as well. So we're going to explore that as well. Also, too, just a heads up for everyone that's joining us now, please wait until the end if you possibly can, if your schedule allows, because we will have an interactive recap at the end to try to retain knowledge of the information that we're sharing on today. So really excited about that. All right, the first thing we want to talk about is permissions. And stop. Permission is required beyond this point. We're going to start the permission section off with a poll question.
All right, let me go ahead and drop down that next one. There you go. So, do you review your permissions on a yearly basis? Yes or no? And we'll keep this open for a couple seconds as I see that majority of you have time to vote. See, about a little over half of you, about 75% of you have voted, so we'll just give another second. Allow you time to read that. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close out this poll and share the results. And it shows that 23% of you do review your permissions on a yearly basis, and 77% do not. So very interesting results there. And Bryant is going to explain a little bit why maybe you should.
Awesome, awesome poll. Thank you so much for your feedback on that and participating with the poll questions. These are very helpful to us to make sure that, again, the information we're providing is meaningful to you, and we appreciate you providing that information. So on permissions here, I mean, it is very important to review permissions, but, if you're like us, excuse me, you get busy into your day, to your week, and your week turns into a month, and you just get busy with everyday operational type things. And when do you review your permissions? Well, a good time to really do it is to put it on your Outlook calendar is in the beginning and the start of each new year, and that's why we're doing this. With permissions, just some general overview information about permissions. There are different permission levels that can be used to limit the access to various user functions in Manitou and or BowNet software, which of course is our web-based software. Permissions, the permissions form itself in the Supervisor Workstation has 4 different variables as it relates to permissions. Applicable permissions is one section of it. Permission profiles is another section. Then there's a navigation tree with items, and then there's the permissions grid. Don't have to take notes on this because we're going to jump over into Manitou and we're going to look at this information in real time as well. With the applicable permissions section, what we're looking for there as it relates to permissions, you can make items visible, addable, editable, or deletable. Say that 100 times, right? So basically it's giving you the ability to see, to add, to edit, or delete different items as it relates to Manitou and the BoatNet software. We're going to explore more in Manitou, so don't worry, we'll get there as time permits. After we discuss permissions, we're going to discuss options and the different possibilities of what you can do with your Manitou system and customize that. But you know what? It's a good time for another poll.
All right, so similar to the last one, we have, do you review your global options yearly? And I have a feeling we may have a similar response, but we'll give that a couple more minutes where about half of you have voted. So just a couple more seconds. And it's looking to be about that same. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close it out. And I apologize if you don't get a chance to participate. It's okay. We have a lot of other things that you can participate in. But it looks like 17% do and about 83% do not. So there you go, Brian.
Awesome. Again, thank you very much for participating in that poll. It gives us a lot of information that we can use for our future Coffee with Manitou sessions. As it relates to options, it's very important to review your options. We're going to discuss best practices when you're reviewing your global options. And again, it's good to review that every year in relation to your standard operating procedures that you have as well. We have a dynamic training program that we offer now called Operational Excellence that's being headed up by Karen Morgan. Most of you on here, probably almost all of you, know Karen Morgan, and she's heading up that program. My advice would be that every single company participant on this call would seek out with their sales rep more information about our Operational Excellence program, because we work with you with your standard operating procedures, and we look at options and we look at best practices and basically review your entire business and go over that with you and offer recommendations for improvement, efficiency, and being more effective and things like that. So you can talk to your sales rep a little bit more about that, but that's a highly recommended training program. It's worth the investment and it's worth the time. As it relates to options, we're going to discuss some color options, alarm handling options, contact user-defined fields or customer user-defined fields, a little bit of alarm tracking, and a little bit more as we have time. We're going to discuss some common options that are often, again, underused. I'm going to kind of highlight those as well. And we're going to discuss Watchdog Messages as well. And I think we have one more poll here before we jump into Manitou.
We sure do. Go ahead and launch that. Did you know that you can generate a Watchdog message as an alarm event? This is pretty interesting. I can tell you right now, I did not, and Bryant showed me. It's pretty cool, so I can't wait for him to cover that part. And also, just to piggyback a little bit on what Bryant was saying about the operational excellence, it's beyond training. I know he elaborated on that quite a bit, but it's beyond training, and it's really a partnership and a mentor and someone side by side with you throughout the entire process. So again, really cool information and something to look into. But it looks like most of you guys have participated in this vote, so I'm going to go ahead and close it out and share the results, and it looks like 34% said yes and 66% said no. That actually surprises me. So, Brian, I'm going to go ahead and let you carry on and demo out some of these things that you've mentioned.
Awesome. We'll carry on. Well, that's good information. I'm glad you didn't know that. So it makes your day more meaningful today, because we're going to explore that a little further here today with the Watchdog Messages. Watchdog Messages can be set up to generate an alarm event, actually a system alarm event, which is a *Z event in Manitou. That's the event code for that. So you can set a default action pattern with it. Won't go over all the details now until we get to that point, but absolutely you can set Watchdog Messages as an alarm event where they're just not scrolling on the scroll bar, but they can also present to an operator as an alarm event, as well as if you have the auto client or the virtual operator, you can have an automated action pattern to send out, email or text notifications and close the alarm out of the different Watchdog alerts. Okay, Here's some information we want to give you on that as well that we'll get more into. So each watchdog message, this is another one here that's very important. Each watchdog message has a specific type code, and that code is the zone number of the alarm event. So if you've looked at the watchdog messages before, each of them start with like a 10,000 number, that type code. So say 10,035, I believe, is like alarm progress problem. I think that's the one. What you may not have known is that that particular number, when you do create a watchdog message alert as an alarm, becomes the zone number of the alarm event. And most of you that have been using Manitou for a long time, the light bulbs are probably coming on right now, or you're saying, wait a minute, if I can make that type code and that's the zone number as part of that alarm event, now I can put action patterns as it relates to the different zone numbers and do different actions. So really exciting about that. We're going to look more into that and look at these items in Manitou. So let's go into Manitou here. I am going to get out of the PowerPoint presentation. Thank you so much for carrying on with me with the PowerPoint. We try to make it as brief as possible. So now I'm going to pull up the Supervisor workstation, and hopefully you are looking at the Supervisor workstation now. I can tell from the audience view we are on it. We're going to start with the permissions because that's what we promised you here. Now as it relates to permissions, I'm just going to go through the steps here because we do have some newer customers to Manitou, so I want to go through the process of how you would actually access the permissions form. So you would go to the maintenance menu, down to setup, and then over to permissions to get to the permissions form in Manitou. Okay, some of the items that I mentioned when we mentioned the PowerPoint as it relates to permissions, this is where you're going to find your default profile permissions. You have your permissions grid here in the middle of the screen, and you have your applicable permissions legend here towards the middle of the screen here as well. And on the left-hand side, you have the different applicable permissions that you can change depending on the user, depending on the permission profile. So you have application, permissions as it relates to your applications. You have maintenance, which is your data entry type functions. Your operator type functions is found under operations. Your system reports as it relates to reports, of course, and your templates, and then you have tools. And we'll also have a search feature in the permission profiles as well. So as you are trying to make adjustments and changes to different permission profiles, and say you want to make a change to, the contact list, but you want to make sure you cover everywhere in the permission profile where contact list is actually mentioned. What this search feature does is when you type it into the search feature and hit enter, it's going to highlight everywhere that search term was found in the permissions profile. So you got contact list here that's highlighted. Underneath the customer node here, parent node, you find contact list, and if you keep scrolling down, it is just highlighted in all the places where the contact list is found. So you have a little, search function or criteria there that you can use to kind of help you get to the information a lot quicker by using the search feature and define whatever term you are searching for everywhere it is listed in the permission profile itself. Another tool that I want to mention here, let me go ahead and collapse these back together here, is that another thing that you'll see, like underneath the application window itself, you'll notice terminology like change password, close and close all, and help text and lock station. If you're familiar with the operator workstation, you know that this is the same information in the operator workstation underneath the file menu itself. So if you pull up the file menu and you're displaying all these items as visible, you would know that it's almost a one-to-one relation with the permission profile underneath the application section as it relates to everything that's underneath the file menu inside the operator workstation. So if you wanted to take the ability away from an operator, for an example, to not be able to change their password, of course you would go into edit mode here. and you would make the change password option not visible, so whenever the operator would log in underneath the operator permission profile, that option to change the password would not be visible. Okay? Some things to keep in mind as it relates to permissions here, and I'm trying to keep an eye on my time here because we've got so much to cover today. But some things to keep in mind here is that as I click on like application and maintenance and operation and these different applicable permissions here, and I expand it here, the application, for an example on this one here, is the parent node. Everything underneath application like change password, close, and close all, these are the child nodes that are connected to the parent node. So what Manitou gives you the ability to do, that whenever you are making changes to a permission profile, is that once you go into edit mode, there is a new box that actually appears in the middle of the screen here, and I'm kind of showing you before I actually go into edit mode itself. But once I go into edit mode, there is this box that appears in the middle of the screen that says replace permissions on all child objects with my changes. Changes are made and queued in real time until saved or canceled. So what this is giving me here is that if I select here underneath my profile section, I'm going to select the permission profile of operator for an example, and I'll select operator 1. And right now, I'll click on maintenance because that's the data entry functions as it relates to Manitou or BoldNet. And I want to take the ability away from the operators to delete a customer. So if I expand the maintenance menu, this is the parent. Maintenance is the parent node, but a child node within maintenance is the customer. And so I can go in here, I'm in edit mode, and the caveat to this is that if you want to replace permissions on all child objects with your changes, you must select the button before you actually try to make the changes or adjustments to that permission profile. So for an example, I would click the button here, and I want to take the ability away for the operators to delete a customer out of the system. So I'm going to deselect the delete button here, and I'll hit save. Now, that's the quick way to do it, the best practices way to make changes to a permission profile. Let me back up just a few steps here and hit cancel. The best way to do this here, the best practice that we recommend as you are, and this is just a heads up, it's one of your interactive recaps that we're going to do here shortly. When you go into edit mode and you want to make changes to a permission profile, say operator 1 permission profile, I want to make changes to it. When you go into edit mode, this copy button appears here where you can actually copy the profile first. So what we recommend you do is copy the permission profile. You can give it a unique name. I can just say, I can leave it like it is. It's just going to copy that operator 1 profile. Go ahead and hit OK. Now I'm going to make all of my changes to this copied profile, log in with a user, an end user's ID with the operator 1 copied permission profile, and test it to make sure that it's behaving and performing the way that I intended for it to. Once I've done that test and I've went through that best practice process and I've tested everything on the copied profile, then you can go in to make those changes to the permanent operator 1 permission profile. So for an example, in this case, I would go to the copied profile and I would take the ability away to delete at the customer level. So don't want them to delete any customers. And it's also, well, I didn't select the replace on permissions on childlike objects, so it's just at the customer level. So there's items underneath customer that I may want them to have the ability to delete, or like a call list or a contact point or things like that, or deleting something from being on test, taking it off a test. Okay, so keep that in mind as well, that if you do use the replace permissions on all child objects, it's going to trickle down or waterfall down to everything that's underneath it, to all the child nodes that are underneath that parent node as well. So keep that in mind. Here's another tidbit to keep in mind as well. There are just sometimes, I've worked with some pretty extensive requests as it relates to permissions. There are times where, you just have to just start over from scratch and give, and start off with the permission profile that has full access, and then work your way down from there. There are some times that you might have to do that, and that's okay, because you learn a lot in the process, and then at the end you do get to accomplish the goal that you've set out to make, as well as it relates to the permissions. So definitely keep that in mind. Okay, so what you would do, of course, on that copied profile, I just want to walk through this to make sure that we're all on the same page. I would go to the maintenance menu. I would go to the users forms, for an example, and I'll just select myself here. And I would go into edit mode, and then here I would go to that copied permission profile, which is there, that operator 1 copy profile, save it, and then log in with that copied permission profile, test the changes, test the behavior, test to make sure, and then I can go in from here back to my permissions profile and make the applicable changes on the permanent profile itself, which is simply labeled as operator 1. And then I can go in and make those changes here because I've already tested them with the copied profile. Save it. It's going to give me this information dialog box that changes will not take effect until the next logon to the application. And then I can go back into the user itself, which is myself, go into edit mode, and then give myself that operator 1 permission profile with the applicable changes that I've made from the best practice of copying the permission profile first, then applying that changes to the permanent permission profile and updating that user with that permission profile. So hopefully that makes sense. Got a little tongue-tied there, but hopefully I was able to flesh that out a little bit as well for you. Okay? All right, so that is permissions. There are some items that we definitely wanted to cover in permissions. There's a lot of other, I'm sure we'll probably get a lot of questions as it relates to permissions. You do have some default permission profiles that are already in the system. They come out of the box, if you will. You can create other permission profiles. Again, it's good to base those off of previous or existing permission profiles that are there. Another thing to mention here is that on the right-hand side here in gray where it says the global template defaults, etc., then it has one here that says the BoldNet PDA. I have it highlighted right now in yellow, if you can see that on your screen, and then the other one is the BoldNet Silverlight underneath that. What this is telling you is that it's inheriting their permissions abilities or access from a higher level permissions profile. It's getting that information from that. So keep that in mind as well whenever you're copying profiles or whenever you're creating your own or making adjustments to the ones that already exist as well. That permissions document that there's a link within your chat window, it breaks down everything that I just covered. I know I just did some of the highlights of this here, but it does go into greater detail. Review that with some of your questions as well, and if you do have more questions, feel free to reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to go over that with you. Or if you do have questions on, you're having trouble on some of your permission profiles, we'll be glad to help as well. But check that resource first, and that resource might be able to answer that question for you as well. Alrighty. All right, enough of permissions. Let's move over to global options and cover some of these options here. I'm really excited about the options as well. I already have the options form open underneath my current section, but again, for training purposes, I'm going to go through that process of showing you how to access the options form from the menus. What you would do is go to your tools menu, and then you will go to options, and this will pull up your global options. Now, when your global options pull up for the first time, it defaults to the color options, the color global options here. And a couple of things I want to highlight here. On your color options, a lot of sites, whatever it is out the box, whatever the default colors are, a lot of sites use that. But as you review your options on a yearly basis, you may want to become a little bit more strategic in your approach and maybe changing some of the colors and as it relates to your standard operating procedures. So at the very top here, you have these are the default colors for the alarm queue. To the right of the alarm queue default colors like your warning level, your danger level, your suspended alarms, etc. Those are the default colors for that. You have your watchdog messages, and these are the default colors for that. Then you have your report queue. If you have a failed report or a completed report, these are the default colors for that. And then here at the very bottom underneath the customer log, which is where I'm going to focus on highlighting a few things here, you have some default colors here for your customer logs or your activity log as well. And then you have the maintenance issues, if you use maintenance issues, where you can determine which issues have been resolved and which items have been unresolved based off the color of that in the customer logs as well. A couple of things to highlight here in the customer logs is that your transmitter information, for an example. If you have, in Manitou software, it has the flexibility for you to have multiple transmitters or multiple systems all on one account. So if you have a combo system, a fire system and a burglary system, or a fire or burg system, you can have those set in Manitou as two separate systems, or you can have a combined system, whichever you choose. You don't have to have multiple accounts for systems. You can have multiple systems all on one account. Well, what this color option gives you the ability to do here at the bottom where it says Summary Alarm 2+ and Pending Alarm 2+, if you have multiple transmitters on an account, you can distinguish between the color of the customer logs for the activity as it relates to that second transmitter. So if you have multiple transmitters, your first transmitter will have this pink default color based off the color options I have here now. Your transmitter 1, the activity that is sending to you or on the customer logs would be this pink background color. But if you have, say, a fire system and then you have a GPS system or other transmitters that's related to that account, that activity can actually be a different color, so you can look at your customer logs and you can distinguish between the customer logs colors where that activity came from. Did it come from transmitter 1 or did it come from transmitter number 2 or 3 or 4 or etc.? Right now in Manitou, majority of the deployments that we've seen is that it's usually just one transmitter on an actual system, but if you do have multiple transmitters, it will be this Summary Alarm 2+ or this Pending Alarm 2+ color on the customer logs. So hopefully that makes sense to you. A lot more information, we can really get into that, but that's actually a pretty nifty feature to have that visibility from the customer log perspective in Manitou. Okay, so those are your color options that we wanted to highlight here. A couple of new options or newer options. I think these were presented in 2015. I think one of them might have been presented in 2014. Nevertheless, they are newer ones that I do want to highlight here. Underneath, before I do that, in your options you have your account creation and maintenance and your accounting, your alarm handling, alarm tracking, options as it relates to that. Contact point device defaults, your country and locale, your general options, your location and GPS options, your output details, passwords, we're going to cover that, purge options, report options, response options, signal processing, system options, version or revision related options, voice recordings if you're integrated with our voice recording module, and then Watchdog related options. So these are the different sections. So if I was to expand each of these topics here, we would be on this webinar for days. So we're only going to highlight a few of those for you here. One of them I want to highlight here in this section here is underneath the signal processing one. There's a couple. One of them is going to be the auto client. Let me expand this out here just a little bit more that we can see the text. Okay. One of them here is preventing the system from forcing video and audio associated alarms to an operator's screen. The great thing about options, you that probably have even been using Manitou for a long period of time, most of these options you probably can, give a definitive answer about these options in your sleep. If you're like me, sometimes you need a little help and you need the further description button here. And there's a further description that's included with all of the global options that you have that will give you further description about that particular option as how it relates to Manitou. If I make this global option change, what will it affect? What will it do? So it's going to pull that information actually from the Supervisor user manual, which is available to you on the help menu. So let me actually show you that. I've kind of left this up just to show you that if that's new to you. But if you go to your help menu and then do help on the Supervisor Workstation, it will pull up the user manual as it relates to whatever section you're currently exploring. So right now I'm exploring the signal processing information, and I went to the help menu and then help on the Supervisor Workstation, and it pulls up the online user manual for the Supervisor Workstation, and it is updated with the latest and greatest information. So keep that in mind. If you're ever lost, definitely use your resources. We do try to provide these resources and have them updated for you with the latest and greatest information. So on the further description for this particular option, just to show you how it works, if this option is turned on, it will prevent the system from forcing video and audio associated alarms to an operator screen. So basically it relates to the auto client. It allows the auto client to take the initial actions on these alarms wherever possible. So if you are monitoring video, when you have audio as well, if you're doing two-way calls and things of that nature with our media gateway, and if you're not, you should look into that. There's other possibilities there. This might be a great feature that you want to have because you want the auto client to be able to do the auto client related functions, those items that do not require any human intervention, but not force your video and audio associated alarms to an operator screen. So that's a newer function that was presented, I believe in 2015. Don't hold me to that. I'll have to review the release notes here. Another option here that's underneath the system section for global options that I want to highlight here is underneath system, there's one that says use external browser for URLs. If this is set to yes, Manitou will use the default browser that's at the workstation level for that particular URL. So, some are doing video monitoring, and they're doing video monitoring by using a URL. By default, Manitou uses the IE or the Internet Explorer browser within the Manitou Media Matrix itself. But if you use, Mozilla Firefox, Google Chrome, or something other than Internet Explorer, if you have this option set to yes, then it would use your default browser to display that URL that's in Manitou. It doesn't just have to be video monitoring. It could be, you want to just display a URL. It could be a website that you want to display if that's part of your action pattern to display URLs, because that's another option that you can use for action patterns as well. So that's a newer option that we wanted to make sure that we mentioned that. Some of you, if you're following along with me and you have your Supervisor Workstation up, you're probably saying right now, wait a minute, I don't see that underneath my system. Well, that's because this is an update number 14. So you would need update number 14 in order to have that option available for you. Okay? Couple other things here. Kind of looking at my time here is under alarm handling. Okay, underneath alarm handling here, I want to discuss, actually, you know what, before I go to alarm handling here, let me do alarm tracking here. It may take a little bit more time. Underneath alarm tracking, for those sites that actually use alarm tracking, if you want alarm tracking deployed, of course, it kind of goes through this waterfall steps of permissions here. So what I have here, I do want alarm tracking to be deployed. So I have the option here of don't ask and don't cancel. So if I do my drop down here, there's other options here. There is a don't ask, and then there's cancel, and then there's an ask that's here as well. So if I want to deploy tracking and have that available, and I want to track alarms to the operator who handled the alarm, to every alarm that's been handled in the alarm queue for that master customer, I want to have this option selected. That being said, that's under alarm tracking cancellation. Then there's alarm tracking mode, where I want that tracking to be deployed automatically. So as soon as the operator handles the alarm, I want alarm tracking to be associated with that particular master customer. And don't ask, don't cancel, that's there. The next thing I want to revisit is the alarm tracking timeout. How long do I want that tracking to be associated with that operator until every alarm event is handled for that particular master customer. So if there's multiple events up to 20 minutes after, how long do I want that to track? So right now the default that I have here in my test system is 20 minutes. You might have 60, you might have 30. Keep that in mind. Another helpful tip here when you're doing changing the global options and there's numbers involved where you can either have, is it seconds or is it minutes, that further description button will let you know if that item is in minutes or seconds, etc., by doing the further description button. But another tidbit with this here as well is that if you wanted to know the maximum amount of time you can have a particular option, type all nines. If you type all nines, Manitou will give you the maximum amount of time you can have that global option by default on any of those. So if you're doing a cancel abort timeout limit, if you're looking at 2-trip programming timeout, if you do all nines, it'll give you the maximum amount of time that you can actually have that particular option. And this here, I think I had it at 20 minutes. Yep. So I'll put that back at 20 minutes. So keep that in mind as well. Okay. Couple of things about tracking. Periodically, if if you're a site where you are using this, periodically cancel your tracking. You understand if alarm events for that master customer, if they are tracked to an operator, it will show on the tracking form on the Navigator tab, which is on the left-hand side in the operator workstation. It will be listed there, but you want to periodically cancel your tracking. And another thing to keep in mind, if you're using alarm tracking, it means that the last alarm in the queue for the customer, anything on hold will not cancel tracking. So keep that in mind as well. So if you have an alarm event that's on hold, technically all of the alarm events for that master customer has not been completed. So keep that in mind. So periodically cancel your tracking. And if you use the escalate command at all, you will not want to cancel tracking automatically if the alarm needs to return to that same operator. Because if you do the opposite of that, it'll go to another operator who might not have the same context as the operator who originally handled that alarm event for that master customer. So keep that in mind. Let me move on. I'm telling you, time is really running by. Passwords. Another item to mention at the beginning of the year is that Manitou does have the ability to have this complexity of passwords that is equivalent to the way you might have in your network passwords. To get into your network itself, might be some requirements there where you have to have an uppercase letter and the password length must be this amount. Manitou does have that ability with the global options to have that same complexity with passwords in Manitou as well. So it's really good. I mean, in this cyber security age that we're living in, it's probably a good time to kind of revisit that and have the complexity of the passwords where it's not really easy for someone to hack in and someone to use other passwords and things like that. So cybersecurity is important to us, so that's why this feature is here, and I wanted to make sure that that was mentioned on this as well. Okay. Another thing to revisit here is, let's see, so much. Let's go to signal processing here again because I want to spend some time on that Watchdog message alerts here. But underneath signal processing, there's a couple of items I want to highlight here. Number one is generate maintenance list items. Okay. What this feature is for, this could be a very good sales-oriented feature that you could use in your central station. Basically what it gives you the ability to do is that if you receive an open and close signal for a particular customer and you don't have an open and close service, monitoring service, set up for that customer, it can generate a maintenance item that you then in turn, or sales department, or however you have that set up in your organization, to make that outbound phone call to the customer to say, hey, you're sending us open and close signals. You know what? For an extra $5 or whatever pricing is in your respective places, we can offer an open and close service for you and actually monitor your open and close signals that come in and out. And of course, with action patterns and the virtual operator and all of these different options that you can do with Manitou, you can offer an additional service for customers if they're currently not using those services now. Those are open and closed signals as well as test signals. If you're receiving a daily test from a customer and you don't have a daily service, monitoring service set up for that customer, or a weekly one or a monthly one, whatever the case might be, Manitou can generate a maintenance list item for that again, you can do that outreach to the customer and use that as a sales opportunity to provide an additional services for your customers, or if you're just doing a value-added services or whatnot. So keep in mind, if you do turn it on, it's going to be turned on, and you will receive those maintenance items on all those different customer records or accounts. So keep that in mind as well. All right. The other one I want to cover here is generate duplicate alarms. Typically, we highly recommend, even in our initial new customer setup process when we're going over global options, is to turn this to no, to generate duplicate alarms. That's the same alarm, same area, same zone, or same partition, same zone. Turn that to no. However, as it relates to generate duplicate events, this we recommend yes. And the reason why we recommend yes is because what this is looking at, duplicate events, it's looking at the event category. If that event is in the same event category and it follows the same action pattern, you do want it to generate that duplicate event, especially if you don't use the ribbon notification bar in alarm handling. Okay, you want it to generate that duplicate event. So say for an example, you have a medical event and a panic event. Those can be in the same event category and they can follow the same action pattern, but if this is set to no and you're working a panic event and a medical comes across, if you have this set to no, it wouldn't generate that duplicate event because it's in the same event category and follows the same action pattern. So something else just to keep in mind. I've left a further description up. It might be too small in text to read, but go back and read that as well for yourself, and as it relates to this global option as well. So let me jump to, I'm running out of time, so I'm going to jump to the Watchdog Messages because that's the one I've really been trying to get to. There's a couple of options I really wanted to cover. Sorry about that, just running out of time. In the Watchdog Messages, of course, when you pull up the Supervisor Workstation, it automatically defaults to the Watchdog Message logs that we see here. So these are some logs here. Of course, nobody wants their Watchdog Messages in their Supervisor Workstation to look like this test system here, of course. But there's message types, which is the tab here on the very bottom of the Watchdog message form. There's your message types. So there's multiple alert types that you can use for Watchdog Messages. I counted these up here recently. There's about 47 different potential Watchdog message alerts that you could receive, starting with 10,001. So I'm just going to move this over here so we can see a lot of the text here. Okay, but the alert type is scroll bar, which is usually probably the default on most places. There's scroll bar, there's pop-up, or there's none. So you can go through all 47 different potential Watchdog alerts, and you decide if you want that item, is that item worthy of having an alert itself. And if it is worthy of having an alert, then it's either scroll bar or pop-up. We recommend scroll bar because it's going to scroll across the bottom of the screen. I have an alarm progress problem for line fault of a priority 7 for monitoring group 0, scrolling across right now, and you determine that. So you can go through all 47 of them. The other thing you determine is that which user groups, if they're logged in, will see those events if you have selected for an alert to happen. Okay, so if it's the system level user group, administrator or supervisor or operator user groups, you decide. So your operators, of course, are going to be a part of your operator user group. Is this a particular Watchdog alert that I want my operators to see as well? Then, of course, you want the appropriate and applicable user group to be selected. Here's the information that's probably underused here at the bottom, the event code. What I can do with any of the 47 alerts, potential Watchdog alerts, I can make them be a system alarm, which is that *Z, that's the 2-digit event code for a system alarm. And I can have a default restore code here for it if I wanted to, which would be the *Y for it as well. Or I can just create it here as a system alarm. And if I create it as a system alarm, I can go to the event codes. So I go to maintenance and then events and then event codes. And I can go to my star. I can go to my *Z, which is a system alarm, make sure it's set as an alarm, and I can have a default action pattern that particular system alarm will follow every time that I get one of those Watchdog alerts. So of those 47 alerts that I get, I can set a default action pattern to it that way. A little bit more flexibility of what I can do with those Watchdog alerts is, this is awesome here, is that you see the number, which is the type code over here for all of the different Watchdog messages here, like I got 10,007, 10,015. This number here, this type code number becomes the zone of the alarm event itself. So that being said, if I was to get an alarm progress problem, which is 10,035, and I have that as a system alarm, try to do this really quick because I'm going to run out of time. So I'm going to make my *Z, excuse me, a system alarm for this particular event. So I want that event to be in my alarm queue. Also, too, most of you probably know, or if you did not know, that in the Supervisor Workstation, there you can view the alarm queue in the Supervisor Workstation as well. So read only, where you can't, action any alarms, but you can view the alarm queue in the Supervisor Workstation as well. Okay, so I think I just got one. There's an alarm progress problem. I'm going to filter this here and try to show you this in real time. I just love live demos here. Hold on one second. *Z and show you. I just want to show you that zone number here. Okay, so I'm going to say I just want to see my *Z's, and that hasn't arrived yet. Sure enough. Let me remove my filter and explain to you what I'm saying here, because of course live demos, you're always trying to show it. Underneath this zone column here in your alarm queue, of course you can customize your alarm queue to show what items you want to show, select or deselect here in the item, but I have the zone view here as well. So that type code number, that 10,035, when I get that alarm progress problem event, since it is a system alarm, I'll get a *Z, but the zone number will be 10,035, which gives me now the flexibility, now in the operator workstation to go to my systems tab and then go to programming. I can now go into event actions programming, and I can have for that *Z, I still want it to be an alarm because it's looking at the event code level or the global level, and I can have a customizable action ID or action pattern just for that particular zone, 10,035, which is that alarm progress problem Watchdog message alert. Great. So let me stop here, turn it over to Julie for some final comments here, and we do have this interactive recap. Sorry, we're running really short on time. We will address your questions as best as possible, but Julie, take it from here.
All right. Thank you so much, Bryant. I do want to just throw out a couple questions, but really quick, two things I want to cover. One, I apologize that the chat option is not available. I don't know why, but I provided those links in the question section, and I will try and add them to the email that's going to be sent out to you tomorrow for those documents that Bryant was referring to. And also, one of the questions that was mentioned was asking about the password. If you change the complexity of the password, will it automatically force password changes to any that don't fit that profile? And the answer is yes, it will. But just really quick, I'm going to launch this first question. So other than the scroll bar, Watchdog Message Alert, what other Watchdog Alert options are there? So if we want to answer those real quick, we have pop-up, none, system alarms, or all of the above? All right, and we're definitely getting some responses. And just really quick, if we weren't able to get to your specific question, we will contact you directly and respond to them. So I apologize for that. I know a couple came in, and I just didn't know the answer, so I apologize. So about 70% of you have voted. I'm going to go ahead and close this out so we can go on to the next one and share that. Let's see, 35% of you said pop-up, 5% said none, and 30% said system alarms, and 54% said all of the above. And the answer to that is all of the above. So we're all pretty familiar with the scrolling bar at the bottom, the red scrolling bar at the bottom, but you can also choose to have that as a pop-up instead. You can choose to have no alerts, or you can do those system alarms that Bryant was demonstrating last. I'm going to hide that and do one more. There we go. So when editing an existing permission profile, best practice is to do what? Just edit the existing profile and save, copy the existing profile, make changes, and test, or never edit existing permissions. And it looks like a lot of you answered pretty quickly, so that's a good sign. I know he emphasized on that quite a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and close this because we're right on our last minute and share. And sure enough, so 3% said just to edit and save, 92% said to copy, change, and then test, and 5% said never. And the answer is to copy that existing permission profile first and make all the changes on that copied profile, test it before you make it final. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Look for that email that you should be getting tomorrow with this recording. And any last-minute questions, I will keep this webinar open for a couple of minutes. So if you think of any other questions, please ask them. And again, we will respond directly with any questions that we weren't able to answer. So thank you, everybody.